Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. I figured we might as well go live. Let me see if I can get the YouTube link. Okay, we got the YouTube link. I just need to post this. All right, my friends. Here we are, right? We're cliff dwellers. Same old, same old. Nothing's really changed. We have some important developments. Not necessarily yet in the crypto world, but if you take a look at equities, we have the Dow Jones really flirting with the June low. Okay, so for the people that said we would not revisit the June lows, I mean, listen, I listened to a lot of uh, experts that said, we would not revisit the June lows, and here we are. The low on the Dow is 29,653, so we're really in danger of putting in a lower low on the Dow. The S&P still has some wiggle room, right? Still some wiggle room. We got about another 1.5% to get down to the June low. The Nasdaq, I think it's about the same, maybe 2 or 3%. Yeah, like 2.3% or so. Bitcoin might have the most leeway out of all of them, out of those anyways. Yeah, Bitcoin is about 5 to 6%. Now, here's the thing. As you go further and further, like as you get further and further out on the volatility curve for these assets, this is why they get hammered so hard. So like the Dow is already almost at its June low. The S&P is like a couple percent away. The Nasdaq is like 2 to 3% away. Bitcoin is 5% away, and Ethereum is 30% away. Right? It's 30% away. Now, you might take the stance that means Ethereum is going to hold up a lot better, and maybe you're right. Or maybe it's about to get hammered on the Ether Bitcoin pair. Okay, this is something else to consider. I mean, again, we've talked about the idea of a distribution phase on Ether Bitcoin and Ethereum. If they're all going to retest their June lows, then Ethereum has much further to fall. Okay, that's just a fact. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but if they are all destined to retest the June lows, you have to take that into consideration. If we go take a look at Bitcoin really quick, we can look at a few things. The bull market support band's coming in at around 23 to 25K. So if we were to see any type of potential bounce off of the June low, remember you want to look towards the bear market resistance band to see if we can actually break above that. There's no compelling evidence yet that we have any momentum to break above it, but you never know. That's where I would look towards first. And the dollar is continuing to move higher. And we talked about this, right? We've said this many times. The dollar is in a parabolic rally. It's a wrecking ball. When the dollar goes parabolic like this, you generally should assume that risk assets remain under pressure with the Federal Reserve continuing to raise interest rates into a slowing economy. We talked about this a lot. The macro side of things, it doesn't look that great. But the dollar is continuing to sort of go on this, on this wrecking ball of a rally, and it continues to hammer these risk assets. So we'll see how high this next leg is going to take us. But it does at least look like, it was correct to assume that it would eventually break out to fresh highs. Let me see. Do we have any questions? Yeah, I'm not going to provide any advice on leverage trading. So if you're asking about that, oh, someone just said the Dow Jones is at a lower low. Is it true? So the low over here was at 29,653, and we just went to 29,648. So the Dow did in fact put in a lower low. If it's a sign to come, then it's just a matter of time before the S&P, the Nasdaq, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the other ones put in their own lower lows. So this is something I think that's important to consider. Remember, we talked about the idea of the S&P getting rejected off of its 200-day SMA, in sort of this downtrend. And I think it's also important to sort of recognize that, that this bear market, as we've seen before, I mean, with the S&P, these bear markets can last longer than you think. The last two major ones, the low wasn't actually in until the Fed stopped lowering interest rates, not when they stopped raising them. Now, arguably, there are some differences in terms of like when the Fed started raising. Normally, they raise interest rates when the economy or when the stock market is moving up, not when it's moving down. So there are some nuances to exactly that sort of pattern. But I mean, it is something to consider. Like the Fed, unfortunately, is not coming to the rescue right now. So you cannot look to the Fed for QE or anything like that. They're simply not going to do it. And we've talked about this all year. Why? You guys know why, right? Inflation is at 8.3% year over year. Core inflation still has, it's accelerated from 5.9% to 6.3% year over year, thus affirming to the Fed that inflation needs to get back down. That is the most important thing over many other things. I mean, arguably unemployment is just as important, but according to the Fed and according to the metrics that we have, unemployment is still relatively low. So that's not even something that they can point to say there's any, reason why we should assume that the Fed will pivot anytime soon. I think it makes sense to, I think the stock market is slowly pricing in, a recession, probably in 2023. We can argue about whether we're in one or now or not. And I mean, you guys know where I stand, but I think sort of we're seeing the market really figure this out, if, starting to price in this possibility, the compression of earnings and whatnot as we continue on. What questions do you guys have? Well, we'll try to answer a few questions here. Adam says no one has cash to buy. I've been saying all year cash is king, right? Like literally since Q1, cash is king. So if you don't have cash to buy, then as I've said many times, right? It's not the altcoins you YOLO into in the bear market rallies that give you strength at the depths of the bear. It's the cash you stacked along the way. So look, you have to learn the lesson at some point. Cash is king, and the dollar will continue to likely show strength for a while now. But I mean, we are still looking at some of these Bitcoin metrics that we've showed on the channel before that still are sort of holding out on calling it a bottom. We'll see what happens as we go into the end of the year. All right, looking at the questions. With inflation so high, it's definitely hard to save cash. Yeah, I mean it is. I'm not trying to say that it's not. It's just that in a sense, if you sort of took the stance for the year that cash is king, it's not like this idea is coming out of left field that the dollars should be going higher and that risk assets are going lower, right? I mean, if you sort of took this mantra for the entire year, then it's not that big of a deal. What are my thoughts on the utilization of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Yeah, I think so. The issue is with regards to oil. One argument that oil is so low is because the offloading of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and that eventually they'll have to buy it back. This could put some upward pressure on oil, maybe in early 2023. But on the other hand, a potential recession should also cool down the price of inflation. So I mean, I sort of see both sides to it, and honestly, I don't have an opinion on oil that I feel like is worth taking a definitive side on. I see both points. I think from a recessionary point of view, it makes sense that the price of oil goes down. From the other point of view, you could argue that there could be some buying pressure coming if the United States decides to replenish their stockpile. But I mean, I'm sort of hoping that oil goes down so that headline CPI starts to come back down. I'm not rooting for oil to go up. I would prefer for it to come back down so that we can start seeing some more more positive data. on the inflation front, because that's really what's that's one of the main things sort of keeping us at bay right now in a lot of these risk assets. So I would prefer to see oil go down. So that's probably my bias. If I were to remain objective, I'd still say, well, from a recessionary point of view, it makes sense it goes down. But from the potential of the the powers that be replenishing the strategic petroleum reserve later this year or maybe next year, maybe it could lead to some temporary surges back in price. Um, yeah, guys, make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you haven't already. We got 2,000 people watching and 200 likes. Why is the alt market not completely crashed yet? It's a good question. I think it will. I think it will. I don't. I mean, admittedly, it's holding out longer than I thought it would. But I do ultimately think that alts still have some downside to go. How much do they have to raise interest rates to lower inflation when it's at 8.3? Well, history, I put out a video yesterday that might be worth watching. History shows us that they raise interest rates sometimes up until the interest rate goes above the 2-year yield. So if I were to show you this, sorry, not this chart, let me remove the S&P and we're going to add over the 2-year yield. So history shows us, not always, but history does show that there's plenty of, let me merge this into one. I mean, you can see cases where the interest rate had to go above the 2-year yield before they were done. That happened here and it happened over here. There were some times where it wasn't the case, but the 2-year yield right now is already over 4%. So, I mean, I think the argument is that interest rates are likely going to need to get at least above, to the 4.5% range before we have a realistic chance of seeing the Fed potentially consider other options. But we're clearly not there yet. Someone says alts are already down 99.6%. Most alts are not down 99.6%. And the idea that you can say something like that without providing any concrete examples of altcoins in the top 20 is just simply, again, it's nonsensical to be completely honest. A lot of altcoins might be down 80%, 85%. Hell, some might be down 90%. But listen, just because an altcoin has gone down 80% doesn't mean it can't go down another. It doesn't mean it can't have another pullback. So, I mean, yeah, like, are altcoins down? Yes, they are. They've been wrecked already. Could they go down more? Yeah, they could. And I mean, this is the argument that we've set for the entire year, right? I mean, they could go down further. Just because they've gone down so far doesn't mean that they've gone down 99.6%. There's actually a large difference between something going down 80% and something going down 90%. Or, I mean, going down, let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about. So, like, if you were to go look at an altcoin like ADA, and you can kind of see how far down it is from its all-time high. It's currently down about 85% or so, which would get it at about 45 cents. For it to be 90% down, it would need to be at around 31 cents. A 99.6% drop would literally put it at like a penny. So there's a huge difference between like an 86% drop and a 99.6% drop. So look at the percentages a bit closer before jumping to any major conclusions on those. Yeah, I mean, obviously Luna went down, but I mean, that's sort of a different story. All right. What other questions do we have? Diminishing losses playing a big role. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some elements to that. I mean, if you look at prior prior bear markets. We have seen diminishing losses before, so probably worthwhile to keep an eye on. We had like a 94% drop, 86, 87% drop. Then this was like an 84% drop. Well, right now we're sitting at around a 70, 73% drop or so. I think the argument is it enough? Is it enough? I mean, it's going from 84 to 72 as much as it needs to be. All right, so let me see what other questions. Do I worry about regulations for the next bull run? I don't. I mean, I think regulations are probably part of the reason of the current bear market. Not necessarily going to be major issues for the next bull run, but I mean, I think they're more so I mean, in addition to high inflation, in addition to sort of the Fed raising rates and whatnot, and also going through a period of QT, those are the risks right now. Once we come out of those, then hopefully we get another bull market. Okay, sorry. I think I missed some questions. Let me scroll up a little bit. Yeah, I never because I haven't done as many live streams recently. I forget about all the trolls that are out there. But the great thing about live streams is that you can quickly get rid of them. Uh, do you think regulations will target stable coins first or securities? Do you mean like altcoins? They are. I mean, they're clearly. It looks like they're making some headway on the both. So I don't know exactly. I mean, they've already. I mean, there's already a lawsuit with Ripple, right? There's already. I mean, XRP has already been in this with the SEC for a while. So, I mean, you could point to that and say that they started this years ago. I know some people are saying that the bottom is already in. I mean, I'm fully aware of that point of view. What coins do you think will be classified as a commodity like Bitcoin? I mean, I guess Ethereum has probably the highest likelihood of being classified as a commodity. A lot of the other ones, I think there's some question marks on, honestly. Um, so, yeah. Uh, how long is the bear market going to take? Best case and worst case. Well, we've talked about this on the channel a number of times. So we've looked at the best case and the worst case. I mean, obviously the best case, I suppose, is the bottom's already in. I don't know how realistic that is. I mean, if we were to get another lower low, the bear market would be fairly well aligned with prior bear markets. So I do think that's one thing to consider. Beyond that, if it's a lower low after the next low, then it's very similar to what we saw with the dot-com crash. So, I mean, it kind of depends on how bad do you think it's going to get. And I mean, I've laid that out in multiple videos, so I don't really know if I need to go over it every single time I do a live stream. But if you look at say like the Nasdaq, we had that first 40% pump in the dot com bubble burst. We then had a 50% pump, and we had a 60% pump. And all of those pumps, the bottom was not in, right? So you had a 41, a 50, and then a 60. and the bottom ultimately ended up being a bit lower than all of them. I think the thing you have to compare to is sort of the total crypto market cap, and say the worst case scenario for me is if it just plays out like the dot-com bubble, right, where you have that first like 40% pump, and then we had the second, the 50% pump, and so if we get another 60% pump after a new bottom below the current bottom, and it's still not the bottom, then we're going the way of the dot-com bubble burst, and so that's what I would consider to be the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is the bottom's in, and sort of a middle ground would be, the bottom would be sometime at the end of this year. So I mean, I think that more or less spans the various conditions that you might see. Yeah, so right now Bitcoin is sitting at 18.6K. So it is getting somewhat close to this bottom. It'll be interesting to see if we reach this bottom. Maybe we get some type of a bounce off of it. I don't know. I mean, we haven't tested it in a long time. We haven't actually gone below 18K since, and we haven't gone below 18K since June. So I mean, we haven't even tested the 17K level, these levels in months. We have been testing, around 18 and 19K quite a bit, but we haven't gone as low as where we were in June quite yet. Um, total total market cap is currently below the 200 week. Let me go take a look. I don't honestly look at total that often, so I mean, I sort of just look at it when I'm comparing it to sort of the .com stuff, but yeah, so it's currently below it. I mean, look, Bitcoin is also below it, so it's not. I mean, the total's below it, Bitcoin's below it, it's on the 200 week. One of the things you have to remember is that the 200 week came up a lot higher than it probably would under a lot of prior bear markets, because we sort of had the secondary bounce up to 69K. I mean, if we had just come down after the first top and maybe the Fed had pivoted in mid 2021, which is probably when they should have, the 200 week would have probably been at like 15 to 16K. But because we had a bounce, we had a lot longer for the 200 week to slowly get, to be dragged up a lot higher. Uh, any evidence to suggest ETH is following Bitcoin's return, comparing the beginning runs of each? Yeah, I think there's plenty of evidence for that. Someone says, what is the most annoying part of being an influencer? Probably being called an influencer. The 300 week is close for Bitcoin, is that right? The last time I checked, it was at like 17 something. Yeah, it's at 17.5. So we are approaching the 300. Yeah, I have gotten used to the Mac. Make sure you guys give the video a thumbs up if you haven't. We also do have the newsletter. You can find a link to that in the description below. We also have ITC Premium as well if you want to check it out. Yeah, so some people are asking about the Bitcoin dominance. So here's the Bitcoin dominance. This includes stable coins, so I mean, still not looking that great. Not including stable coins, as I've said many times, it's still putting in higher lows. I mean, if you include stable coins, it's going to have some large effect on it. But I mean, if you don't include stable coins, so if you exclude stable coins, we've essentially just been putting in higher lows for quite a long period of time now, and even getting another bounce here. So I mean, I'm still I still think that it's more likely to go up than down, excluding stables, and even including stables, I do, but it is certainly taking longer than I thought it would, admittedly. Um, how do we know the market will find a lower low when the Fed printed 40% of cash in the last 2 years? I don't think we know for sure of anything. I mean, all of these are just speculative guesses, dubious speculation at best. I mean, at the end of the day, no one knows a damn thing. We're all just guessing and trying to come up with conclusions based on evidence that we see. But I mean, no one knows exactly what's going to happen in the markets. Thoughts on Bitcoin forming a death cross in the 5 day? I mean, I'm not really sure that the 5 day SMA. I mean, this is what the 250 day and the 1,000 day SMA. I mean, at some point, I don't know how important it is to follow that. But uh, if cash is king, who's the queen? Um, I don't know. I mean, cash is. I mean, at least U.S. dollars is destroying everything right now. It's a good question. Is the Dow Jones? I mean, it did go below its June low, but I think right now it's still sitting just above it, right? Or is it? So the low over here was 29,653. So it's right at its June low right now at 29,656. So I mean, there's a good chance it's leading us down right there, and now it's at a new low. So, um, well, I mean, it even went lower earlier, went to 29,643. So the Dow is testing its lows. The S&P is below 3,700. The low on the S&P is at 3636. So not that much further down. Yeah, Bitcoin, yeah, remains stuck in traffic on Struggle Street as always. Spirit thought for us in the UK, the euro is dropping like a rock. Yeah, I mean it is. The euro, I mean, I think the euro will bounce probably when we go back to being risk on. Is my thinking on this. I mean, I think that the dollar is just really acting like a wrecking ball on essentially most everything at this point. Not, I mean, not everything. There are some things that are in a bull market locally, but the dollar continues to put a lot of downward pressure. Make sure you guys give the video a thumbs up. Let's try to get to 1,000 likes. We have 3,000 people watching. What other questions? Where's the logarithmic regression for Bitcoin? So there's different ones. I mean, there's the rainbow. We can look at that first. So here's the regression rainbow for Bitcoin that we've utilized in the past. So before we get too far into it, you should know that in this first cycle, you could argue that it bottomed sort of on this greenish line. In the second one, it bottomed on that same line. Okay, but then the next cycle, it came down to this one, had a wick even lower. The following cycle, it also bottomed on the same one, but it then we had the pandemic drop even lower. That regression line is, and again, I mean, to some degree, remember, the macro is important, so let's not put our And let's not put our heads in the sand and pretend like it's not. But to get us back down to the level that we went to in the pandemic crash, in terms of where it would be on the regression, back then it was like 4,000. Today that would correspond to about a 15K Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin were to go to 15K, it's essentially going to the same regression that it did during the drop in March of 2020. Comment on the latest chess drama. I don't really have any official comments, but I will say it as it helps getting us through the bear market, right? The drama always helps. I'm sure everyone is following it, so I don't need to go into it. Yeah, there's an interesting chart. The S&P divided by the Dow. I don't know if you guys have looked at that one before. So S&P divided by DJI. So is this the one? There was another one. Or sorry, I think it was the Nasdaq. Sorry, it was the Nasdaq. Yeah, so if you look at like the Nasdaq divided by the Dow Jones, what's interesting is how it peaked at the same level that it did in 2000. So if you take the Nasdaq and divide it by the Dow Jones, I mean, it looks like it's more or less just slowly moving up with time, right? Um, you could argue that maybe like sort of the base channel is this one or something, and we have bubbles that take us out of it, but that ultimately we sort of come back down to those levels. So yeah, I mean it hit the same level as it did before. We'll see what happens when we get out to like 2040 or something. Kind of look at Bitcoin divided by the money supply. Sure. So Bitcoin divided by, sorry, index. Bitcoin USD divided by M2. So yeah, if you take into account the money supply, it looks like Bitcoin is sitting close to the or just below actually the 2019 high. So that's where Bitcoin is sitting if you take into account the money supply. As inflation is a lagging indicator, is it possible that price stability could be reached sooner than expected? If you look historically, it often takes at least like a couple years, if not more, for inflation to really get back down to 2%. So I do think it will come down over the next couple of years, but to get it back to 2%, I don't know if they can achieve that as quickly as they'd like. I think the only realistic way they could achieve it is if they kick us into a somewhat deep recession. Then maybe they could. And maybe that's what they're trying to do. I don't know, but um, someone says Bitcoin is undervalued. I mean, I think there is evidence to suggest that you're right. But we do know that it can stay undervalued for long periods of time. And I think maybe the best way to sort of view that is if you look at like say like the fair value regression line, if I can find it. So it's been a while since I've looked at some of these. So I'm trying to find it. Here it is. So if you look at the fair value, you could argue that we just sort of go through periods of undervaluation and overvaluation, right? And yeah, like we could be undervalued, but it can also stay undervalued for long periods of time, like we saw over here in 2011 and 2012 and 2013, and then in 2015 and 2016 and in 2019 and parts of 2020. So yeah, I mean, you could make that case, but it doesn't mean that we can't stay undervalued for a longer period of time. Is this all setting up for a bull run in 2025? I mean, I think we certainly could have a bull run in 2025. Nothing really has changed at this point. I mean, 2014 bear, 2018 bear, now 2022 bear. Looks like the 2-year is continuing to go up. It's currently at almost 4.2%. So fairly bullish on the 2-year, on the 2-year yield. All right, we have any other questions? Any realistic questions? Any useful or any thought-provoking questions, or are we just see a lot of spam? That's my opinion on gold and silver. I think I think like most things they're gonna get they could easily get hammered until the dollar stops rallying. Some people have asked me to look at ETH Bitcoin. You guys know my position on ETH Bitcoin, right? I'm bearish on the Ether Bitcoin pair right now. I'm not that bullish on this pair. And I even put out 2 videos, one right before the merge, one right after the merge, saying that this is the secondary distribution phase following the first distribution phase earlier this year. I mean, so far it looks like it's playing out. Um, I mean, to me, it looks just like a secondary distribution phase. So, I mean, if you want my full thoughts on the Ether, just go watch my videos called Ethereum the Merge and Ethereum after the merge. And I'll go into full details then as to what my general expectations were. Someone asked if the Dow took out the June low. It did. And it's actually sitting below the June low right now. So it's actually, if you zoom in here, it's actually, well, it just bounced back up, but a minute ago it was below it. So yeah, I mean it has gone below the June low. The S&P and the Nasdaq have not yet gone below it, and of course Bitcoin hasn't gone below it yet either. And of course Ethereum has it. I mean, Ethereum has the most wiggle room, but that also means it also could easily have the most to fall if it's destined to do it as well. So other questions? Yeah, I know there's a lot more stable coins in the market right now. That's why it's important to look at Bitcoin's market. That's when we look at the dominance, you should look at it with regards to with stable coins and without stable coins, because they give you a very different view. I need to figure out how to reduce the spam in the chat. Oh man, it's been haven't done many live streams recently. I forget how the chat can. I mean, it's not most people. Most people are absolutely fine, but there's always a few, right? What stable coins do I prefer to hold? None right now, honestly. I'm not super into the stable coins at the current time. I mean, I was back in 2020, 2021 and 2019 as well, but during this phase where liquidity is being like sucked up and um I'm not. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to figure out how to turn on slow mode. I don't actually see it over here. Um Goldman's now predicting the S&P to 3,000. These guys change their predictions every other Tuesday. I mean, yeah, there's a good chance the S&P goes to 3,000, but it's like when the market's going up, they say it's going to, they say it's going to like 4,400, or I'm not necessarily Goldman saying that, but these institutions are constantly changing what they're saying based on the flavor of the week. So you also have to remember there's a lot of different analysts at these institutions. So you might have one analyst say one thing, and then another analyst say another, and then it just sort of it gets grouped into this institution saying it when it's usually just various analysts at the institution who have differing opinions. Oh, I can make a poll. Let's make a poll. Where first for Bitcoin? Oh, it can only be okay. So we'll do 15K and we'll do 25K. Um, Someone says the majority. It looks like people are voting mostly for 15K before 25K. The majority can get it right in the middle of trends. They got it right in the bull market in the middle of the trend. I mean, back then I always said like, where is Bitcoin going first? And people always predicted the higher price, and it usually went to the higher price first. Do I think I have influence on the market? No. All I'm doing, you guys, is showing you charts. It's up to you to make your own decisions. All right, guys. I think we're losing steam here. We're losing steam. Anything else? I just see the same questions being spammed over and over again. Um, Bitcoin's currently coming in at 18.6. Let's see. The Dow's out is putting in new lows, 29,630. So the Dow's pushing lower. I mean, keep an eye on the Nasdaq and the S&P. If they put in lower lows, likely going to see the same thing happen on Bitcoin. Likely going to see the same thing happen on ETH, and then by association, the altcoin market in general. So, um, I mean, some of these can sort of lead into it. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that we can't bounce a bit. I mean, a lot of times you will see bounces and whatnot in these areas, but they can often take some time to play out. If we actually go back and look, maybe at the last low back in February, did we actually bounce there at all, or no? Did we just go straight through it? Yeah, it looks like we bounced a little bit. We bounced a little bit back up, so could easily see some type of bounce or something, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop us from putting in another leg lower. look at ADA. ADA is currently at 45 cents. I mean, it hasn't really done anything special in quite a long period of time. Still below its 20-week SMA, as you can see. So still resistance at the bear market resistance band, just like it had back over here in March, just like it had in August, and it's having again in September. So nothing too different yet on ADA. Yeah, the dollar is up to 112.7. So, uh, the dollar rally continues, and I keep saying, right, cash is king, cash is king. It's clearly reflected here on the chart. The dollar continues to rally, and it is a wrecking ball for risk assets in general. All right, guys. Remember, we do have the newsletter. Link to that in the description below. Um, and we also do have Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com, where I'm a lot more active. So we also have all the website charts and everything. Any more questions? Last thing. Let me see, maybe one or two more questions. Is Link still a bleeder versus ETH? It is holding up a little bit right now, so I think it's important to keep an eye on it. It's been a bleeder for a long time, but you can see it is kind of showing some strength finally, just a little bit, right? I mean, nothing to get out of bed for necessarily, but it is showing a little bit of strength recently on its Ether pair. All right, my friends. Let's check in on Bitcoin again. So it's at 18, almost back to 18.7. Gosh, the Dow's just pushing lower. I mean, it just doesn't even care. It's just pushing lower here. If it's a sign of things to come, then the Nasdaq and the S&P are both going to be testing their own June lows here in the not so distant future. Oh yeah, XRP. Some people have asked about XRP. Yeah, so XRP has seen a bit of a run here recently. I think probably the reasons are because of what's going on with the summary judgment, I guess, that where they've called for. You know, what's interesting is we saw a similar move by XRP back in September of 2018, in fact, right? Sort of rallied off of these, about 30 cents, maybe a little bit less, all the way up. It actually went all the way up to 75 cents on a wick, but it sort of hit that 59-cent level. So, yeah, I mean, I would say to maybe keep an eye on this. We're still, I mean, it's, at the end of the day, it's still a bear market, right? But it's not necessarily anything we haven't seen before, right? So just something for your consideration on the XRP USD pair. I mean, I know a lot of people have been bullish on XRP for the entire bull market, but the truth is that the XRP is one of the few altcoins that was in the top 10 that did not put in a new all-time high, right? I mean, that's just a fact that it was one of the few that did not put in an all-time high. I know I don't really talk about it a lot, but I mean, what has there really been to talk about other than it's just another altcoin that failed to put in a new all-time high? I mean, I get that there's the court case and whatnot, but there's no way, I mean, it essentially, arguably, it sort of mitigated how high it could have gone last cycle. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really talked about XRP that much just because I haven't really had any great reasons over the last 2 to 3 years to be that bullish on it, especially after what happened with the SEC. So yeah, I mean, maybe it'll be a coin that'll run in a future bull market. I mean, it is running a little bit right now, but these moves don't necessarily mean anything, and it might not be sustained if crypto in general pushes to back towards the June lows. Looks like the final results were 73% of you guys thought we were going to 15K first, 26% say 25K first, with about 1,500 votes. Yeah, we're going to do the DCA live today. I think at 2 hours or so. All right, my friends, why don't we wrap it up there? Make sure you guys subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. Check out the links